harmony and development. Before we begin the session, may I request Gauri to recite a shloka. Gauri, please. Please give us a hand.
Good morning. In this world of Maya, we're chasing consumerism, profits, turnovers, our notions of success. It's about king size, grandeur, luxury and magnificence. बड़ा हुआ तो क्या हुआ, जैसे पेड़ खजूर, पंथी को छाया नहीं, फल लागे अति दूर. We have heard this very popular doha by Kabir Das 1,000 times. But did we ever wonder how our concept of modern corporate social responsibility can be woven into this beautiful piece of poetry? Everybody is rushing through life. They would benefit by pausing and thinking of their life's purpose. Gandhiji said his purpose was to wipe out tear from every eye. वैष्णव जन तो तेने करिए, जे पीर पराई जाने दे, पर दुखे उपकार किए दिए मन अभिमान नाने दे. The Rig Veda talks of the concept of prospering together. Sam gacchadvam, sam vadadvam, samvo manansi janatam, deva bhagam yatha purve, sanjanana upasate. May we walk together, may we grow together, may we all have a mangalmay existence. Thank you.
Gauri, I think it was one of the most beautiful ways to set up a tone and agenda for this particular session. A responsible, sustainable and transparent approach to business and economic growth provides the best environment for strong families and healthy local communities. In fragile states or post-conflict societies, these are the particular importance for long-term peace and development. This session will highlight the concept of corporate social responsibility and its contributions to the global peace. I have the honor to request Professor Jyotsna Rajan to kindly chair this session. The other panelists are Lieutenant General Rajinder Singh, Rajiv William, Ms. Sonia Srinivas, Swati Ji, sorry if I don't have the full name, Siddharth Ji, Dr. Arvind, and Madam Gayatri. Anand Jagli sir is also here. Good. So, ma'am, this is your session. The session is supposed to be ending at 1:30.
Thank you very much.
And I hope everything goes well. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much. Are you wondering why are we talking about corporate social responsibility in the Summit of Global Peace and Harmony? Are you wondering why are we talking of business? The reason is there is a big question that needs to be answered. Yesterday's morning session of religious leaders talked about spiritual leadership. Sure, it is needed. But do you think conflicts can be resolved only by spiritual leaders? By religious leaders? Dr. Verma talked about religious leadership, spiritual leadership, and disharmony. Why does disharmony exist? Religious leaders have been there. If you have a piece of bread, whatever may be the level of brotherhood, if you're fighting and contesting for it, there is bound to be conflict. Mr. Flynn in the morning session talked about empowerment, empowerment of youth, empowerment of women. What is empowerment? From where is it going to come? Empowerment at the root, at the base, is economic empowerment. Do you know what is, or which is the most powerful institution in the society? Yes, I'm sorry, but it is business. It is not even government. Business is the most powerful institution in the society. And if it is, then there has to be a partnership between spiritual and religious leaders and economic leaders, the business leaders. And this session focuses on the social responsibility that not only business leaders are ready to discharge, but they are discharging. We have to understand that this entire conflict, this entire situation of disruption that is there, can be resolved only with development, growth, which will come with only economic development and growth. So, economic growth, economic development, business is concomitant to peace and harmony that we have talking since yesterday and we propose to talk. I do not want to stand between you and a very learned panel that I have. So I will request Sonia Srivastava of Intel. It's women empowerment. I'll give the dice to Sonia again. So let Sonia begin with her view on how conflict can be resolved only with economic growth, how conflict will be resolved with partnership of religious and economic leaders. Sonia Srivastava is from Intel. She's deep into, she just visited the Kashmir Valley and looked at the conflict from very close. Let's head to her.
Thank you, Jyotsna. I think it's important for all of us to, when we do programs that address community needs, do we look at our community as a homogeneous mass of people? Or do we really identify who are the various constituents? And do we target our interventions based on the vulnerability assessment of the target group? I think that, looking at this whole issue of community development in a more strategic fashion can help corporates institute economic programs and agendas for people in need. And that, to a large extent, I believe, can help in addressing poverty, which is one of the primary drivers of conflict as well. It's been our experience, several of the projects that we've done. We've done projects, for example, for poverty alleviation in the state of Jharkhand, in a district that was dominated by Maxils. And, other companies were actually afraid to go and work in the region. We work with the tribal women there for a women's empowerment program. Kashmir, Jyotsna just mentioned, and the way we've crafted our intervention there is we are actually looking at, any amount of resource, no matter how large a company you are, is always going to be limited. So the process that we follow is what is called vulnerability mapping and assessment, where we look at our target beneficiaries and identify among this large group of people who is the most vulnerable. In Kashmir, we found families with large number of children who are already affected by the conflict in the region. Maybe one parent not being able to work because of some injuries they might have had, etc., were more vulnerable. They were more vulnerable to taking up anti-national activities compared to the others who were not. So looking at your segments and looking at the target group and really identifying which are the segments that really need more focused attention, I believe from a corporate side can possibly go a long way. And as Jyotsna very rightly said, economic development is one of the key drivers. I think all of us understand that. You look at any conflict-affected region in the country today, Naxalism, Maoism, other forms of terrorism, which are the regions where it thrives? The regions where people are affected by poverty, where they do not have, where there is lack of opportunity, where there is lack of opportunities for growth, for education, for livelihoods. And economic activity, focused, targeted economic activity can be a very strong lever to address conflict. And as Madam Jyotsna very rightly said, corporates have a very strong role as a partner to come in and help with the process. Thank you, and more when we, if there are any questions later.
Thank you, Sonia. It's starting with a question. If love was the innate nature of man, then why conflict? We want to actually answer that question. I don't want to look biased. I'll give the floor to Mr. Rajiv Williams, who's the corporate head of CSR Jindal Stainless Steel.
Thank you, Mr. Joseph. Our moderator, members of the dais, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, thank you for inviting me to speak on a very, I thought, and as I was discussing outside, a difficult topic. From the corporate perspective, I've come from corporate world. I come from Jindal Stainless Limited, with a lot of experience from the army, having left some 9 years ago, and joined the development sector. A lot of experience across the country and across the world. I think what Joseph just talked about, the critical component of love, is the most important component. As the Bible also mentioned in Corinthians, that faith, hope, and charity. And the greatest of the three is charity, which is love, which has no barriers of language, which Sonia just spoke about, work in Jharkhand or Jammu and Kashmir, or like we work in Orissa or Karnataka or some other places. Everywhere there is a stigma of language, which can be broken if you speak the language of the heart, and that is nothing but love. The corporates have to understand that when you're working in a conflict environment, whether it is a remote area of Jharkhand, or the red corridor coming from Nepal right away to south, or you're talking about Jammu and Kashmir, or you're talking about the northeast, we've had difficult times. To winning hearts and minds, the critical component is winning the heart. And that's what corporates today are getting used to, because what it means is people. The first P of corporate social responsibility. The triple bottom line when we talk of is P, P, and P. The people, planet, that's the environment, and profits. Rightly used. So when we use the triple bottom line and we align that everything really revolves around the first P, of the people, you can't connect with people unless you're really connected to the heart. And that's the language of the heart. In Jindal Stainless Limited, which is part of the OB Jindal group, which you're aware of, we've got, of course, independent corporate social responsibility directly reporting to the top, because I feel that you cannot decentralize the vision of the top leader. And our vision is to be a socially responsible government, based on which a number of programs, whether it's to do with education, including the IT or skill development, or whether it's to do with women empowerment through self-help groups, or independent, or human rights. And today is the Human Rights Day. We are seated over here, and in fact I should have started off with the fact that wish you all a happy Human Rights Day, 10th of December. So human rights and business are two sides of the same coin, which corporates don't want to talk about. But we've been championing this cause. We've created a CEO forum on business and human rights, which Narayana was chairing, I was convener. We did a lot of work around it. And people realize that it is good for business. And all this, if you realize, cannot happen if you cannot connect with people. So whether you have a program A, B, or C, you have to do it for the people, for the business that you are really getting involved in. And there is a difference here when we are talking about that we are focused around our plant locations. It's for obvious reasons. It's extractive, and the manufacturing sector have to take care of the areas around, the area of interest, area of influence. Then comes supply chain, then comes the others. Whereas in a service industry, whether it's IT, you can go back in India. So there are differences. And I'm not going to really align everything with religion, but yes, religious teachers are important people to change the perceptions of people in the community, in your own organization. So that way, I think they are important tools which have to be placed in the right platform, and they are the movers and shakers of an environment in which you operate. And I would lastly mention about the importance of whatever you're doing, outcomes are important. What is the outcome of your engagement? And that's related to an X amount of funds which are parked for corporate social responsibility, unless you can demonstrate the outcomes, and not demonstrate the outcomes internally, but report it. That's why the reporting framework, which I'm sure Gayatri will touch upon in the IICA. This Companies Act, which has been passed in 2014 of Act 2013, Schedule 7 has listed out 11 activities which have to be undertaken as part of the corporate social responsibility. All corporates have to engage, not on all activities, you can indulge in 1 or 2 or 5 or all 11. But what is important is, come 1st of April 2015, you have to report what has been your spend, or in our language we say investment. What has been your investment in corporate social responsibility in these areas? The reporting is important, and global standards are the GRI 4 and whatever you want to do it, or integrated reporting, or the reporting format that has been given in this voluntary guidelines. Use it and demonstrate it. With that, I think I'll conclude, and maybe we'll talk about things where we can share some examples where the human rights have been violated. To take an example of Rana Plaza in Bangladesh, and some other areas we'll talk about later. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jyotsna ji. A very good afternoon to all of you. In fact, when Jyotsna ji started her address, when she was welcoming us, and she asked why corporate social responsibility in a session which is organized for peace and harmony. And I could hear from audience, somebody said lot of funds which are available, money. So money definitely supersedes everything. Yes, it's right. I think from that cold morning in 2009, December, to today, December 2014, we have come a long way. I come from an institute which is set up by Ministry of Corporate Affairs as a think tank, and we contribute towards policy advisory service. Rajiv spoke about the Companies Act 2013. I have been a part of that journey from 2009 onwards, when the corporate India was introduced to a term called corporate social responsibility. Ministry of Corporate Affairs had released the intent document, a very thin document, which talks about intention. And then that Milton Friedman, the economist, was also remembered that business of businesses is business to generate profit, to make profit. And the first reaction of the corporate world was, why we? Why should we? Our basic objective is to make money, is to generate profit. We are not supposed to do any social good. Why should we do anything towards society? It is government's responsibility. And right, they are. Government is definitely, has kept funds, has been spending on development initiatives, is responsible. So why corporate? So when we released those documents, the need was felt, definitely. Because it was told that the money which you are generating in the form of profit from this planet, as Rajiv spoke about, people, the profit, you cannot go in like isolation. It has to be people, profit and planet. So whatever profit is being generated, it is generated from this planet. You need to take care of the planet, you need to take care of the people of the society, because they are the ones who are, contributing towards making profit also. In 2011, we came up with more comprehensive guidelines, but again in the form of voluntary. They were called voluntary guidelines for social responsibility. Voluntary guidelines for social, economic and environmental responsibility. Again, the corporate India was not very keen to do it. I am not talking, my colleagues on the dais may say that we are doing it. I am not talking about the top 100 companies which are already doing. Yes, we have Tatas, we have Birlas, we have Jindals, we have Intel, we have other corporates also who have been doing. But we are talking about those 11 lakh companies which are registered with Ministry of Corporate Affairs as profit generating units. They are the ones who are the registered companies who fall under Companies Act, and out of them, how many do you think have to follow this new ambit? When the Companies Law was made, Companies Act was made in 1956. It has taken us more than 60 years to come up with an amendment to the new Companies Act. So when those, and in India, in a democratic country like India, the entire evolvement of the act evolves through a participative process. That means each and every stakeholder has to be indulged in, has to be consulted, has to be taken feedback, and you need to, then only the law evolves. So when we were, doing these stakeholder consultations, when we went to corporates and we said that this is to be made mandatory, the reaction was total, it was varied reaction. Companies who were already doing it, they said, we are already doing it, it's not a big deal, all we need to do is, as Rajivji mentioned, disclose, okay, we will disclose mandatorily. But out of those almost 11 lakh companies which are registered, only 16,000 companies are the ones who are falling in this ambit, according to their turnover, according to their net worth, according to the profit they make, and those 16,000 companies are not willing. They are like this Companies Act was passed in 2013. We, as I said, through a very, very long and painful process of going through various houses and then getting it, on notification, and then companies being asked to follow. And today in December, when they are supposed to start from 15th, still they are. From December 2015, they are supposed to disclose mandatorily. Still, the companies are wondering how to do it. The CSR landscape is such that we have 16,000 companies who have to contribute towards social good. We have a government who has passed the act, but still the clarity is not there. Wearing a government hat, being a part of the entire process. I'm saying this because, as Jyotsna ji mentioned, the lack of partnership. The lack of the responsibility being given, the lack of accountability being given. So we at IICA are trying to create that enabling environment in which these 16,000 companies can be involved through another actor of the society, which is non-government organization. I'm sure many of you would be sitting here who would who would be from those non-government organizations. They are the ones who will be working at the grassroots level. We cannot expect businesses to go and work at the grassroots level. So those NGOs who are very passionate, who are very vibrant, who are working, doing their work quietly, contributing in their own way, but now the time has come when they can take the initiative of these corporates, work in unison, create that synergistic partnership, and can work together. Being first year, I can only say that this is a testing water phase. We are just testing how it is going to go about. But I'm very positive, and I'm sure that the kind of money we are talking about, the funds which you refer to, definitely it will contribute towards the development of society. And once society is developed, the peace and harmony will automatically come. Thank you.
Thank you, Gayatri. I'm sure it was so informative and you have understood the journey. Don't worry, we are going to leave the house open for you to respond later. Do you think CSR is needed? Do you think it's correct to make it mandatory? We'll come to you at the end. We have heard the government's point of view. We have heard the corporate point of view. Let's hear it from an independent consultant and social entrepreneur, Anil Jaggi, who's the CEO of Green Earth Alliance. Let's see his point of view on CSR. Thank you, Mr. Jaggi.
Thank you, Madam. Good morning, namaste, salam. I can see that a nice audience without any question. I was impressed to Gauri mentioned something about this Kabir this morning. So मुझे भी एक याद आ रहा था that Kabir का दोहा when I was studying the school, and then that was साईं इतना दीजिए जामे कुटुंब समाए, मैं भी भूखा ना रहा हूँ, साधु ना भूखा जाए. Now, what is the need of CSR in India? Like, we have experts from Mr. William is here, Mr. Ramya Madam is here, and people from Intel are also there. They've been working in the different ways. But yes, I'm working in the CSR domain for quite many more years now. Now, fortunately, we have a very legal obligation is there that okay, CSR has to be there, and somebody has to report on CSR. A lot of legal obligations are there. What is the reporting? As Mr. William has mentioned, that GRI is there about reporting. But to me, CSR was not a legal thing. It was not a profession. It was not a career. It was a passion. and it was not existing. CSR was not existing few years back. When I used to say that CSR is there, then people used to think that something council of research. They were always confused about it. But yes, now CSR is mandatory, as Gayatri has mentioned, Gayatri Madam has mentioned that around 40,000 companies will be there under CSR. 16,000 companies will be there. And as per the reports coming in the newspaper, around 45,000 to 30,000 crores will be there in the market, which is the extra for the development sector. Like government is already spending a lot of money on Manrega project, Sarv Shiksha Abhiyan, and number of other projects are there. But how this 45,000 to 30,000 crores is going to do in the market? Definitely it's going to help the MDGs set by the UN, Millennium Development Goal. And when I see the history, I see that around when India got independence in the 47, the total population was around 35 crore. And now we have more than 125 crores population. And people living under the poverty line is more than 35 crores. When we see the HDI, Human Development Index, we see that Indian state is still in a pathetic condition. Number of people are, poor people are increasing, so the divide is also going up. And when we talk to the corporate, there is a different level of, that mental blocks are there. Because for NGOs, they have been working at a grassroots level. The world is different. For the corporate, they think that they are the best in the world because they are making profit. And the person who's making profit and giving the money will always think he's the better. And the person who's getting the money will always be on the mercy of either the government or the corporate. Recent example is for the last 1.5 years I've been working in Uttarakhand. You know that 14 June, 16 June there was a big rainfall was there and a lot of flood was there. More than 25,000 people died there. And I could see there was a very good kind of synergy because people from all over the country, all over the world rather, they came to Uttarakhand and under CSR, if not wrong, like we are not getting any authentic data from the government, but it is more than 1,000 crores were generated under the CSR. And being part of Uttarakhand, I was sitting in Dehradun and it was a conscious call. It was not driven by any kind of legal obligation, no company act, nothing. We decided, okay, we have to do something in Uttarakhand. And when we went there, the main problem was there, grassroots was working there, self-help group was working there, number of other grassroots organizations was working there, but there was no fund. Even government was totally confused. So that was the best example. I could see that there was the right kind of synergy to develop peace and harmony in the society. And when I just saw this mail from Gauri and ma'am, I was highly impressed because we had to think beyond CSR, legal part of CSR. And I think that is the first step. And I just congratulate you for this thing because India is a country where we need this kind of harmony. We need the right kind of balance in the society. We need some inclusive setup of the growth. And I think this kind of initiative will definitely go ahead. I'm not opening my presentation because it's talking more about the technical part of it, and I don't think that this kind of conferences will appreciate the technical side of it. I was coming, I came from Bangalore after spending a couple of days, and when I spoke to a number of corporate people also. Now what they're saying is the only hesitation or fear in the market is number of people will be jumping in the market as a CSR expert. And already the market is already there. Because when I say that paper reports are coming that 25,000 crore will be there, 100,000 employment will be generated in the next couple of years. And definitely people will jump into it. But what is the holistic model of CSR? Like company like Tata, they never spoke about CSR. But right from the 18th century, they have been working the CSR in a very different way. Now, when legal obligation is there, I've been talking to a number of experts from the Chamber of Commerce, whether FICCI or ESG Chamber or CII, they are only mentioning about the intellectual part of it. I was consulting neither the government on CSR. And you won't believe, a very small company with a turnover of 5 crores, they were reluctant, okay, we should be going for the CSR. I asked that company, why you going for the CSR? Because you don't need it, you are not coming into that legal obligation of it. But they said, okay, because our customer is demanding CSR. It's not CSR, they are saying that you have to be a CSR compliant. You have to do something good for the society, then we'll purchase your product in the European market. And I was surprised, they hired 10 consultants across the country, and most of them are SMEs, not big corporate. SMEs means 10 crores to 20 crores. Customer is demanding, consumer is demanding, stakeholders are demanding. You have to be a CSR compliant, you have to follow some guidelines, whether it's ISO 26000, OECD guidelines, UNGC guideline, or Company Act now, because now it's a very recent guidelines has come into the bill, so it's a different. So I remember in the quotes of Professor Muhammad Yunus, not to go for a profit maximizing business. Grameen Bank, आपने सबने सुना होगा, Grameen Bank, Grameen Communication, they are talking about the distribution model of the wealth. And we have company like Infosys, we have company like Satyam also in the country. When I go to the business colleges, I always ask the student, how many of you would like to go for a job in Infosys or Satyam? Definitely they raise hand for the Infosys. I said, why? What is the basic criteria to select this company? And this is simple is because it's a well-known company, it's most respectable company. When I ask them, okay, are you willing to go for the CSR kind of domain? The answer is, well, maybe 1% or 2% say yes. But still there's a big vacuum. I think it's a responsibility of the ministry, it's a responsibility of the responsible citizen of the country. You have to work together and to make unconsciously to take a right decision. I just quote something. We as a human being have to change the inner aspect of our mind in order to change the outer aspect of the lives. It's very important. Again, nothing to do with the legal part of it. It's just a conscious decision. It's a passion that, okay, you have to do something for the society. When we are doing business in the society, and I've seen that all the companies doing CSR, they are doing pretty good because conscious decisions are right. And on 12th of this month, last month, through CSR, one company based in Bangalore, they collected a lot of money for Uttarakhand. And management also gave an equal kind of matching fund, and we are able to construct 5 schools in Uttarakhand, very remote area of Uttarakhand. And you won't believe, when I went there, more than 3,000 people were there from the different villages. They were so happy. So that was one tangible aspect of CSR, positive side of CSR, because they never saw this kind of expertise for the Anganwadis. We are again constructing 2 more schools in that area. So until our thoughts are interlinked for a purpose, positive purpose, right kind of purpose, there is no intellectual accomplishment. And at the last, I would like to say that we have to take the different stages of the CSR. Mental stage is very important rather than the legal stage. We have to come from the unconscious incompetence, just listen, unconscious incompetence to the unconscious competence. And from the conscious competence to the unconscious competence. Means unconsciously we have to take a right decision. Because legal part will always say that, okay, conscious competence. We have to follow this guidelines, we have to follow that guidelines, we have to report like that because it's a mandatory as per the Company Act now that every CSR report or policy has to be online, it has to be transparent. Okay, one part of it is done. But you know that Indian system, all scheme, whether it's a Manrega scheme or any other scheme, what kind of impact they are able to make it. So all companies, I always say CSR is a complementary, not a contradiction to the business. If you're doing good business, definitely you are going to have the peace and harmony of the country, so the different stakeholder, and it's the word used is interfaith partnership. So faith is very important. So unconsciously we have to take a right decision, good decision which is making a right kind of development in the sector. So I'm thankful once again and congratulate all of you for a very good topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. So we really feel, and I'm sure you've started feeling by now, that in this voyage to peace, in this journey to harmony and empowerment, what we certainly need is an inclusive approach where business needs to partner, and they are partnering. Let's hear it from an academician's point of view now. I'll give the floor to Dr. Arvind Kumar, who's Associate Professor in Lady Shri Ram College. I thought let's hear it from an academician and his point of view on corporate social responsibility.
Thank you very much, Professor Jyotsna Rajanaruta. And I again want to thank you for giving me 5 minutes. We at a professor in University of Delhi, we are prone to speak for 55 minutes. She is giving me time for 5 minutes to speak. And I will try to make my presentation fair and lovely. Fair because we are all set for finishing up this session. And I will try to, because I prepared almost 25 slides, I'll try to make it complete within 5 minutes. So I will start the basic concept of CSR with the help of a quote. Of course, there is a wonderful law of nature that the 3 things we crave most, happiness, freedom, peace of mind, are always attained by giving them to someone else. So if you look at, there are numerous ways of defining CSR, but ultimately what a person is looking for. Person is looking for happiness, freedom, peace of mind. So these are the three things that we are looking for. Folks in this panel talk about legal definition of CSR. So they also talk about, Mr. Joseph talk about the legal definition which is listed in Companies Act 2013. So if I have to refer this act and the definition of CSR, we talked about 11 activities are listed. So the act is also very clearly said that it is not confined to the 11 activity. It's not limited to these activities. You can have your own activity. So the point that I'm trying to make here is basically you can search what is the need of community. You can search what is the need of nation. Then you can design your own program of corporate social responsibility. If I have to talk about CSR equation, so there are four basic pillars of CSR equation. One is economic responsibility, legal responsibility, ethical responsibility, and philanthropic responsibility. So good number of corporates are really working about all these four areas, and we can see the change. Now I will talk about the peace. So if I have to quote again the Buddha, who really worked for the global peace. So how Buddha has defined the peace? So he says, better than 1,000 hollow words is one word that brings peace. I want to, at this juncture, I want to congratulate Professor Verma, who really did a great job in organizing this beautiful conference, where we can have very significant words in the august presence of spiritual leaders, in the august presence of corporate leaders. So we are going to attain the very significant, very important words of peace. So now I will talk about, if you look at the responsibility of peace practitioner. So I am very disappointed. If you look at peace practitioner, how they are doing it. So I am highly disappointed. Now you can see good number of peace practitioners are in jail. I don't want to name anyone here, but everybody knows that. And another thing about the peace practitioners, so they have to communicate very clearly. So I just cite a very simple example here. The one person was he was disturbed. So he said, let me go to the peace practitioner. He went. So in the discourse of peace, so he said, कि आप शांति के साथ रहिए, and his wife name was Soba. So what he understood out of this discourse, he started living with Santi. So what happened as an outcome? So there was a complete mess. So the point that I'm trying to make here with the help of this example, so the words of peace, the practitioners should very clearly communicate to the masses, to the audience people. Now we have numerous examples where politicians are engaged with hatred speech. So there are no more peace practitioners. This is the time where definitely we can attain peace by shared leadership. So we can have leaders which may be very honest, which may be role model, but it's very difficult to have that kind of leadership. And now I will talk about the important issue that we can work upon, that is, we have to, now I want to ask, because majority of the panelists in this panel are from corporate. So I want to ask to the corporate world that we can definitely work to the growth of individual, growth of community. So where we can focus on balanced personal growth, growth in others. I need not to work on the individual growth. I need not to work on only my company has to be listed in Fortune 500 company. We have to work upon the personal growth. We have to work on the organizational growth, and we have to work upon the global growth. That reminds me, if you look at this picture in the background of this conference, which says Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. It's a huge phenomenon, it's a huge concept. So it's not confined to one individual, it's not confined to one nation, it's confined, the whole planet is one family. So we have to really work upon in the concept of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, and definitely we have to work on the fraternity. And now let me move about how we can attain peace. So this is, we all know, we are all intellectual here. This is the presence of all august people, all knowledgeable people here. So we know everything what to do to attain peace. But only thing that is missing that we don't practice. So I urge all people here to practice for attaining the harmony, for attaining the peace. And if you look at violence, so violence is again a bad word. So we should avoid practicing violence. Before starting this panel, I was discussing with Chair. So Chair of this panel is really focused on the partnering. I also very strongly believe that definitely we must have partnering, and corporate can collaborate, partnering with network among like-minded people, organization, individuals who can work on attaining the peace, harmony, fraternity. And they can have partnership with Global Peace Foundation. They can also have partnering with the Interfaith Foundation. So this is the live example. I'm very impressed with how the kind of work that is carried out by this foundation. And they can, because I represent academia, so corporate can also partner with academia. I can see the young generation, there are a good number of school kids who were also participating. So many congratulations, sir, for this initiative. And another thing that I want to urge with corporates, so we can definitely work on conflict resolution, we can work for leadership of peace, and corporate can definitely cooperate in Millennium Development Goals of United Nations, and they can also cooperate in items listed in Companies Act 2013 in Schedule 7. And definitely we can work upon the sustainable development, we can work upon communal harmony. And one thing that I want to offer as a representative of academia, then definitely corporate and all stakeholders for attaining communal harmony, they can work on empirical research work. Not for the sake of, X company is doing this work, they are engaged in women empowerment, they are engaged in education. What I want to emphasize here, definitely there could be some empirical research. It's supposed to be need-based. X village need, these areas definitely we can work upon. I want to give one example here. If you look at, water crisis is a global crisis nowadays. So that reminds me, Japanese model, what Japanese corporate has done. So they come up with an idea like wash basin they club with the sink. So basically I want to show the picture, but you can Google this. So that's a very, very, very ideal example of making innovative product. So like wastage of water that can be used as a sink water. So this is wonderful example. So I want to end because only 5 minutes are given by the chair with one Urdu couplet. यूं ही नहीं मिलती राही को मंजिल, यूं ही नहीं मिलती राही को मंजिल, एक जुनून सा दिल में जगाना पड़ता है, पूछा चिड़िया से कैसे बना आसियाना, भरनी पड़ती है उड़ान बार बार, तिनका उठाना पड़ता है. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Arvind. Certainly you have brought about the fact that global economies are in need of the hour. We have to start with an individual and move to global economies. We have to realize the responsibility of an individual, of a family, of the business, of the society, and the world at large. Swati Bhattacharya, the Vice President of Corporate Relations, Public Affairs and Branding of Ingersoll Rand in India is with us. Let her throw light on her view on corporate social responsibility.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor Jyotsna. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure to be here. I represent a company called Ingersoll Rand, and I know it's difficult to pronounce, and many people say, Intel and the others, but that is what it is. It's Ingersoll Rand. And I wanted to start with a little story. I don't know if any of you have noticed that in the papers, but about a few months ago, there was this piece on how people from the villages of Gurgaon were attacking the corporates, and they had broken into buildings because they were not getting water and power. And they thought that it was the fault of the corporates that were taking up all these resources. So that's a small example on no organization can thrive where there is social unrest or where the society is not happy. And that is an example I quote all the time when I talk about CSR and why it's important for corporates to get involved. And that I thought it would be a perfect example to start this session with, because if there is no happiness in the society, your business will not do well. Over the years, CSR or community development and social welfare really has been something that the government has owned, and it has been the government's problem, and corporates don't understand why we have to take this on right now. Earlier, CSR was something that we would do for brand building, or if we wanted permits to build somewhere or to excavate somewhere, saying this is what will we do in return for community development. But that has changed now, and as many of my co-panelists spoke about, there is a triple bottom line where we are not just looking at economic development, but also social and environmental welfare, and we have to now report back on all of these. So it's not just in India. In India, we've been a first of its kind. We set a 2% mandatory CSR spend, etc. And we're a first of its kind to do that. And if that works out well, and if we have the right checks and balances in place, it should be a fantastic thing to do for an emerging economy like India. It's the perfect tripartite model, the perfect PPP model where the government looks at what are the intervention areas that they need, the corporates fund it, and then there are NGOs who do the last mile delivery because that's their expertise. And that is the perfect model. And if we can make this work, it'll be amazing. And not just in India, globally I think people are waking up to this need of moving from millennium development to sustainable development. And this realization that no organization can make capital gains and not do societal development at the same time. And it is important that all of us sit and realize that, because there is a cynicism among the citizens, because a business's main aim is to make profits. So there is a cynicism saying if you're doing something, there must be some personal thing out of this that you want to achieve. But that is the transparency that corporates have to now build into the way they do business, how they do business, where they do business, and to build that trust among people. Because the people have to begin to work with corporates now in this whole development criteria. So corporates have to become more than resource takers, they have to become market developers now and market builders now. So those are the situations that are arising globally and in India, and we're at the forefront, we're completely prepared to take that on. I wanted to quote here something called the 2014 Edelman Trust Barometer. This is a survey that's been going on for 14 years. It talks about what drives trust for four main stakeholders, which is the government, the business, the media, and the NGOs. And this is a global survey, and what has come out is clearly that people are saying businesses have to lead change. And they have to be able to redefine, reprioritize the way that they think they're going to add value to the society. And they have to shift from the historic transactional nature of capitalism to a model of value creation. It also says that the CEO now has to become the chief engagement officer, where they are educating the public on what are the political, the societal, the environmental context in which they're doing business, and why they're doing what they're doing. Because that is how you're going to build that trust, that is how you're going to build the transparency. And 84% of the global respondents have said it is absolutely possible for organizations to make profit while they are doing good stuff for the society. And there are 16 specific attributes that came out of this, and I have the top four, which says that the business, it has to create programs that positively impact the local community, and it has to partner with NGOs and governments and third parties to address these societal needs. So really what comes out is CSR strategy has to be on the table now. So when an organization is making their big business plans, CSR strategy is one of the things that they should talk about. At Ingersoll Rand, what we've done, I think, is make CSR a part of our business discussions. So when we talk about product development, when we talk about markets that we want to get into, we clearly look at what is the societal benefit that comes out of it. I want to give you one small example because it just proves my point here. Ingersoll Rand plays in industrial efficiency in heating, ventilation, air conditioning, and refrigeration. And we have a brand called Thermo King, which is the largest player in mobile refrigeration all over the world. Now in the West, if you've noticed, there are these really large containers that take produce from farms to retail outlets, etc. And of course, that is one of the products that we have. So we felt morally obligated that we have to do something for India, because India wastes almost 40% of the food that we produce because we don't have the infrastructure to save it. So what we did, what our technology center in India did is, it partnered with an automobile company, and we built a refrigeration system for a smaller Tata Ace kind of a car that could go into the rural parts of India, into the farms, and could help save the food. So where farmers are starving, they have more food to sell and they have more food to go around. And of course, I can't quote numbers, but that has become one of the most successful products that we have. And it feels good because I feel this pride to say that we have made that impact on the society, whereas our profits have also gone up. So that, I think, is the direction that corporates have to take. That is the direction that we have to work in. And the other thing that I want to talk about in the Solrand is really the way that we've gone about CSR. Most organizations will want to do CSR in silos and bits and pieces because they don't want to share the brand value. And I think we launched something called Social Convergence, where we have said that any organization that brings any expertise, or if we bring expertise to a larger cause, then we're happy to partner with anyone. And we don't want to look at, does it bring our branding value down, or does it dilute our brand? So that, I think, I would urge all organizations to look at that, to really go out and look at collaboration, look at partnership to have more impactful programs in the country. And I think that is when we're going to make the right effect. And that is where this country should move to, because tomorrow's leaders will look at companies that match their values when they look at employment opportunities. And that is where companies have to start realizing their potential. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Gayatri. Swati. Swati has given the corporate point of view. But have you ever wondered, why do we blame the business world? Why do we, as soon as the word business comes, you think of the word profit. Whenever they do something, you think they're doing it for their profits. Whenever let's say they build a hospital, they build a school, you think they are increasing their brand value. They are increasing their market value. This is the difficulty of being good. This is actually the difficulty of being good. At the end of the day, good is done. A hospital has come to the society. Schools have come to the society. So let's not blame the corporates. Let's not look at them saying that they are doing it to build their brand value. What if their profits have gone up? If their profits have gone up, the society is getting the benefit of it. So let's not make good difficult. That's my request to you. We have with us Mr. Siddharth Shankar, the President, Strategy and Business Development of Drishti. Let's hear him and his view on corporate social responsibility.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me here. I hope to put a different perspective to debate, maybe the debate eventually. I work in an NGO. It's called Drishti. It's now 15 years old. But my career, my life has been spent in the corporate sector. To some extent, I'm schizophrenic. I have several friends in the corporate sector, and this is a typical interaction. So when I go to a friend and I sit with him, we talk about pleasantries, and we talk about the work I'm doing. At some stage, he turns and says, how much funds do you need? And I say, I didn't come here for funds. But you know what? And this is hypothetical. You know what? I need your intellectual capital. We create a rural supply chain which can help farmers. Can you share with me your technology so that it can help? And I think this is something fundamental about CSR. Someone said, one of my co-panelists said, it has to come from the heart. And if it doesn't, if it's just about giving money, then it's not an enduring relationship. And I think people want enduring relationships. And what is enduring relationships? I think it's about livelihood. It's about fishing, not eating the fish. And I think that's what I would recommend to my corporate friends now here and the others who I've had. That share, everyone has something or the other. So there's intellectual capital, and if I can get the intellectual capital, money can follow, money will follow. So I think that's one of the 4 or 5 points that I wish to make. And I think this relates to the interface which corporates and even government and sometimes NGOs have with the people. It's beneficiaries. It's they versus us. These are the number of people we have impacted. That's the impact assessment, right? And the moment I bring in Dave and us, it's like counting sheep. And that, I believe, is also one of the causes for the nationalism, for the terrorism, when it's they versus us. It's about love. One of my panelists suggested, co-panelists suggested, that it is about love. But if you are not treating those people, as us, then this is bound to happen. And I think this is about a very fundamental issue which most of us, corporates and governments and individuals, do not recognize. So we feel we are somewhere up. We have something to do. Sure, you have something to give, but to equals, to friends, because you have something to take as well. And I think that leads me to the third point. And the third point is about trust. And we work in Bristol in rural India, and very frequently we find one fundamental issue which is all pervasive: trust deficit. I mean, that's the term I coined, but this trust deficit is all pervasive. Too many governments, too many politicians, too many leaders, including religious ones, too many NGOs, and too many corporates have gone to villages, taken photographs, and promised the earth and not delivered. So when a corporate goes again to the same place, people would look at them with a little bit of indifference, and certainly without any trust. And they will talk about big things. And I think that's one of the few reasons why many so-called CSR programs fail. Because there is no ownership, there is no trust. And I think it's critical for people to think of creating ownerships. And I don't want to stretch it too long because if there is question and answer, I'd like to bring up several more points. But I think the last point is it's about it's related to the first point and the second point. It's always top down. So the corporates make a program. Better still, they make a foundation. They make a CSR department. That CSR department works very hard to make a CSR program, which sounds very good in boardrooms, but it's always top down. The governments make so many schemes, but it's always top down. And if you really want to make the corporates or the governments or anyone else really want to make the actual program work, then I personally believe, and let me tell you, I've been a schizophrenic, I've been in the corporate sector, so I kind of understand. But unless you work bottom up, unless you immerse yourself understand the needs. Okay, it's too often where someone comes and says, you know, we've got this fantastic solar product. It will help people. And they throw it and they'll say, look, it's so durable. It costs only 489 rupees. But they don't realize, for example, that the kind of people, the kind of families that we deal with, that we interact with, have a monthly income of 3,000 or 4,000 family income. And that 389 or 489 rupees is a huge amount for them to spend. So, I think if we want to have effective CSR, we have to be bottom up. We can't afford to be top down. There are many more points, but I think I don't want to bore you. It's a long session. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Siddharth. I think it leaves us with a thought. Is it bottom up? Is it top down? We'll come back to it. Lieutenant General Rajinder Singh just joined us. He's the CEO of DLF Foundation, which is the philanthropic arm of DLF Group. You know, he was supposed to be our first speaker, but for some reasons he couldn't be with us earlier. He's a social innovator. I wouldn't stand between you and him. Let's hear him and his point of view on CSR.
Respected Chair, distinguished panelists on the dais, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, at the outset, my apologies. It is not good for a soldier to be late, but believe me, ladies and gentlemen, there were certain circumstances which really forced me to attend to them, and that is why I was not able to make it right in time. But it is good that I am able to come here now and be able to share with you certain thoughts which are not really very conventionalists, because I feel that this latest act, the Companies Act, which has come into being, and the kind of aura that has emerged after the CSR and the mandated 2% of the profits has come into the market, has been able to generate. I think there are certain things which need to be put in perspective. But before I do that, I think it is extremely important for all of us to understand as to what is the kind of an environment that we are today looking at. Can we really blindly follow and copy the Western model? Can we blindly copy what the big corporates in the United States of America are doing? Can we or should we charter our own course? Before we do that, it is important to recap some of the aspects that our country faces today. Ladies and gentlemen, our country is passing through defining moments. Defining moment not only politically, even in that sphere I suppose there are certain elements of defining moments, but we are passing through defining moments in a number of fields. Firstly, we have had tremendous amount of growth in the last decade or so, notwithstanding the recent dip in the last 2 or 3 years, but we have, in an overall context, have been a very fast-growing economy. We are IT superpower. We are one of the youngest nations of the world with an average age of 28. We have today a kind of population where we can truly boast of our intellectual property. Our children, when they go out and go to United States or to Europe, they are able to dominate that environment not by physical domination, but by capturing all the or most of the top positions, whether it is in the field of science, technology, whether they're doctors, engineers, scientists. You will find that we have made a name for ourselves. And that has been possible because we have one of the largest technical manpower in the world. Besides this, we are today, we can truly boast of our entrepreneurial capabilities, notwithstanding what has happened within our country. But I think one thing we all have to understand, that there is something in us. This economy is not being driven by the government. This IT became the talking point of the world not because of the government. It is the private sector. It is those small and medium entrepreneurs who were able to generate that kind of a scenario which made it big. So today, if we have to do something, I think we have to take these factors into account. But there are a number of challenges, and those challenges are not small. One of them was mentioned by my previous speaker. First and foremost are the challenges to the unity of our country. And that is a challenge in which our society is undergoing a certain amount of threats from within. And these threats relate to people getting disgruntled. They are losing faith in the system and resorting to means like Naxalism, extremism, or whatever. And you have a large number of states of ours where the problems of terrorism and problems of insurgencies have evolved, whether it is Northeast, it is Jammu and Kashmir, whether it is Jharkhand, or whether it is in some other states bordering Jharkhand, like in Bihar, even parts of Orissa, Andhra Pradesh, and all this. I think these are dangerous signals, and we need to take note of these. These are socio-economic problems, a lot of wise people say. They say that this is because of the people, the differential between the rich and the poor is so high that the poor who are not able to really get enough to live a decent life, with aspirations being what they are, they resort to or they take up arms. I think this is one of the major problems. Second major problem is you are the youngest. A large number of population or of young population which needs jobs, and you don't have enough jobs to give it to them. So what will happen? You will have a lot of problems of this kind of Naxalism and all in times to come. And therefore, we need to do something to ensure that we skill these people, create enough jobs, and be able to ensure that these people become useful members of our society. This is our second challenge. Our third challenge, ladies and gentlemen, lies in the field of healthcare. And why I say this is that though we are largest or fastest growing economy, probably the third largest economy in the world, third or fourth, yet we are 135th or 136th as far as Human Developmental Index of the United Nations is concerned. It's a matter of shame. I think we need to do something about it. And the major aspects in this lie in the field of healthcare. And last but not the least, I think it is also extremely important as far as challenges are concerned that we look at some of the issues which will make our nation great. We need to exploit our strengths, and those strengths lie in the field of education. Over a period of time, the standards of education have come down, though higher are a strong point, but I think there is a need for doing something about it. Having said all this, what do you think should be the role of the corporates as far as spending on CSR is concerned? It is just 2%. 2% of profits. 2% is peanuts, ladies and gentlemen, and that complete 2% of the concerned corporates who even if they spend their complete amount of 2%, will be nothing but a minuscule amount in the budget of one small ministry of the government of India. Let's take note of it. It is no big deal. It's only a small amount. So therefore, what should the corporates do? Work in the environment in which their profits go up. Work in the environment in which their brand goes up. Unfortunately, no. I think it is high time that our corporates stand up and take note of the fact that they are part of the nation-building exercise. I think it is high time that they take note of the fact that they need to, side by side, along with the people, along with the government, do something for nation building. And therefore, we must invest our CSR money into those areas which are national priorities. And that is why I feel, much against the thoughts of many of our colleagues, probably in our own setup as well, but many of our colleagues feel that our CSR must be concentrated where we are located so that our good name is really propagated. People say, कितना अच्छा आदमी है, कितने अच्छे लोग हैं, कितना अच्छा काम करते हैं. No, certainly not. You want to increase your brand, spend the 3% for increasing your brand. But this 2%, for heaven's sake, ladies and gentlemen, let us concentrate on nation building. Let us concentrate on those issues which are important to this country. And those issues, to my way of thinking, it's only my personal way of thinking, relate to getting jobs for the underprivileged. That one man you get a job, 5 people will benefit. His wife, his parents, his children, 5 people on an average will benefit. So therefore, let's concentrate on that. It does not matter whether you produce rubber to make houses, you build townships, or whether you are a mobile company, whether you are a company dealing in a subject which has got nothing to do with skills. Let us concentrate on skill development. Let us concentrate on healthcare. Let us concentrate on these 2-3 major issues which the government has laid down. Let us follow this lead of a new Prime Minister who has come, who says that let's make this skill as a priority area. Let us follow him when he says let's make our villages the model villages of the country. I think, ladies and gentlemen, there is a lot of good in what he says. Whether you agree with his philosophy or you don't, it does not matter. National priorities don't change. National interests don't change. National interest is we have to make this country one of the finest and propel it to a leadership role in the world. And that we can only do if we can propel our country in a manner in which its greatest asset, that is its manpower, is really considered to be the finest in the world. I think it is also important. It is not to say that the corporates must not really strive for better profits. They will get better profits. Certainly they will get better profit. In case you concentrate on the national issues, your brand will also incidentally go up. But even if it doesn't, how does it matter? It is a pure, piddly, small, little 2%. What is 2%? It is nothing. So therefore, at the end, I would once again like to beseech all of you that we should not really stand on the rooftops and howl to say that we are spending 2% and we are spending it in so-and-so field, so-and-so field, and so-and-so field. And because of this, my company is very good and we are very innovative and all that. I think let us together join hands in this people's movement and make our villages the best, make our manpower the most skilled and get them jobs, and last but not the least, provide the best of healthcare to the people of our country. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Skills. If we have all this, we can certainly be at the top. It's just great to have meets like this, but great to have vision, good to have ideas, but it's the time to put it in practice now. Let's act. We have a very small time, that is 10 to 15 minutes, as given to me by the organizers. And any questions to any of the panelists? Should we take a couple of questions and then, yeah, please.
Thank you for this excellent panel. My question is that, of cultural identity and civilizational values. And what I want to know from all the esteemed speakers here is that, are you thinking in terms of Indian modernity, where these values are sustained? Because I think there's a very major gap between what you want to do. Everybody's talking about ecology. Okay, that's fine, But there are many other things. For instance, I also have 2 small NGOs and I'm an Indologist. And whenever I ask for money for saving a manuscript, a Sanskrit manuscript, I have not received even 1 rupee. So I would humbly request the corporate sector that we need to be educated what India is from the time of its ancient culture, and what is culture and how can we preserve it. Thank you.
Thank you. From Gauri, can you please pass on the mic? We'll have 5 questions. I don't think we have time beyond that.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm Ramit Basu. I'm a development sector consultant. I think one of the areas where we can utilize this corporate, the CSR 2%, is the need of the hour that next year the Millennium Development Goals comes to an end, and the world is signing on to, the UN is signing on to another set of sustainable development goals, which is supposed to be more and more sort of comprehensive. So we have a responsibility as corporates in India to sort of embank ourselves, and as the last honored speaker has spoken, to align ourselves with the national level priorities. The second aspect I would like to bring in is that can CSR move to, currently to the welfare, from the welfarist approach to a rights-based approach. I think in the last government, also in the last decade, we have seen quite a few rights promulgation in India. And we, CSR, also the corporate need to bring into its aspect the rights aspect. Thirdly, when we talk about employment generation as skill generation, yes, my last question, madam. My last question. When we talk about employment generation, can we look at areas like agriculture, which sadly has had, less of employment, the younger generation leaving agriculture, moving to cities?
Thank you. We leave the panel to answer it.
Thank you.
Gauri, can we give it on the left?
Morning. I'm Mukesh Anand. For 14 years I was helping wounded soldiers. 10 days back I took up a very major task to eradicate cancer. I've taken it up in a very big way, and I want to ask one question to you, ma'am. This campaign is going to be heralding, like polio, we're going to eradicate cancer. Can we start this campaign at LSR? It's going to be.
Sure, we'd like to do that.
And
Thank you very much.
Short question, and that's why I said let me get to you.
Thank you very much. Gauri, will we give it to you?
to ask a simple question. Does corporate social responsibility, its philosophy, include clean business ethics also?
Thank you. I think we will let the panelists first answer these questions.
I will give you 2 examples. One is, you make a product. You don't take care that whether it is injurious to the consumer or not. You only go for profit. Then, in the pricing, for brand name, building the brand name, you make excessive promotion costs. Excessive advertisement. What we see on television today, it has changed the face of television. Excessive advertisement. One advertisement coming 5 times. What do you achieve on that?
Thank you.
We are paying 30% more for a product because of your excessive advertising.
Let the corporates reply to you.
Well, thank you for the questions. I know that some questions have been, that young gentleman spoke about mindset sustainability, and somebody also alluded to the fact that there is sustainable development goals. Well, to be honest with you, the corporates have moved from the era of charity, welfare, philanthropy to a more sustainable agenda. And that's exactly why from the MDGs now we're going on sustainable development goals since Rio 2013. So that point has been well received by the world over. There are a lot of acts which have come thereafter, and there are issues relating to what you mentioned about ethics and ethical practices. There are standards laid out, whether it's the OECD guidelines or Dodd-Frank Act, of how you can procure items from conflict areas. So all that processes have come in place, keeping sustainability in mind. And therefore, I think last question, which was from that lady about the cultural sensitivities, it's already actually given in the Act, and there are corporates, one of us like us, and I'm sure there are many others also, who are working on preservation of cultural identity in many ways, including art and craft. Thank you.
See, one of the problems which our country faces is that whatever government spends, we know that out of 1 rupee, actually it trickles down less than, say, a couple of. Now the problem is that any benefit of even this 2% must be felt by the people. Now in our villages especially, things do not change. We are all concentrating on cities and other things. Now I was in charge of a project in Ponta. Now we spent a lot of money on this, but what happened was after 3 years, 4 years, we see that people who have benefited from our project are the baniyas, contractors, but the poor villager has remained where he was. But I think anything which you do, while it is good that we do the healthcare and we do other things, but we should also identify what does the villager want whose land you have taken away. You have taken away 70 acres of the land from the village. He wants road, he wants school, he wants water probably. I think it's better to invest in something which trickles down to the person who lost his land.
I will only like to add here that yes, when the government spends 1 rupee, maybe 10 paisa reaches because of the bureaucratic structure. But it doesn't happen with the corporate world because they are monitoring it right away. When they spend 1 rupee, I'm sure as close to 95 paisa reaches at the grassroots level. And I'm speaking this in the authority that I did a research project and we actually visited these slum areas and we talked to the beneficiaries and they said yes, they are getting the advantage. So that's the difference between the corporate spending and the government spending.
Let me just add one word here. I would like to echo what our friend from Drishti said. It's not about 2%. I'm sorry, this whole conversation seems to be restricted to 2% of spend. It's really about how do you conduct business? How do you integrate social and environmental sensitivity into the way you operate? And that includes all kinds of issues, right? From ethics to supply chains to using your core competencies to help and benefit society, like our friend from Drishti was saying. So I would encourage people here to, while the government has, I think, done a very good step towards putting a framework together, and it was not an easy task for them, I can definitely say that, because this applies to companies which are not just the size of the Jindals and the Intels, but even small and medium companies. So I think here the challenge is how do you set up a common minimum denominator that would be acceptable to all the companies impacted. But having said that, I think it's time that we move the conversation away. It's not about spending 2%. It's really about integrating, I think, responsible business practices across everything that we do as companies. It's about bringing our core competencies to the table. It's about ensuring that the spend happens in a much more results, outcome-oriented manner with a lot of transparency and ethics and governance also, having been addressed. So that's just what my last 2 cents on this.
Yes, I think I agree with Sonia that it is not about 2%, it is not about compulsion, it is not about compliance, but about passion, about your heart, about what you think. But rest, like whatever said and done, but still we are sitting, like India is the first ever country which has come up with such a law, which is not there in any countries of the world where the companies are mandated to spend. So what we are talking about is these 16,000 companies, out of which, as Sonia said, maybe 1,000 belong to that category of Jindals and Intels and big, but we still have those small and medium enterprises where a feeling of business ethics has to be inculcated, that culture has to be inculcated, but at the same time when it is done under the framework of law, it definitely helps. So if like my appeal would be to just like each one of you should go through the law and what exactly Section 135 of Companies Act talk about. Like for example, the culture that Madam spoke about, the culture. We have created a Schedule 7 it is called, which has 11 items in it, and it is a very comprehensive list which includes almost everything. And on the top of it, government still says that you can take liberal interpretation of that. Like it has to be in consonance with that list, but whatever activity you are doing can be in consonance, can be liberally interpreted according to how you feel the need. And the government also says, the law also says that every activity has to be in a project mode. So that also answers to the apprehension about the need assessment. Because when you take up as a project, it has to be only after you do the need assessment, need analysis, whether it is actually required or not, and accordingly you develop a project around it. So in order to facilitate and create that enabling environment, we have a database of all these 16,000 companies. We are asking the quiet actor I spoke about, the NGOs, to come and register, because I think the person from Drishti spoke about the trust deficit. Definitely that trust deficit is there. The companies who have to spend, we should not forget the fact that they have earned that money. Whatever 2% is not a small money, like small amount. They have got this money, they have made this money after putting in their blood and sweat. So they will not be able to part with it just like that. Just we say that you keep 98% and just give us 2%. Nobody would do that. Even we would not do it unless we know where it is going. So the companies are also not equipped to do this work at the grassroots level themselves. So where does the NGO fit in? They are the ones who would actually carry out this work. And as Swati correctly pointed out about the tripartite agreement, it is important that a synergistic environment or partnership is created where the companies can spend, NGOs can work, and government can, take care of the compliance part. Thank you.
Thank you, Gayatri. It's such a topic which can have an endless arguments, talk, thoughts, debate, but we have to stop for want of time. I'm sure we have come to a conclusion that it's a time of partnership. May it be public and private partnership, partnership between the government and the corporate world, partnership between spiritual and religious leaders and economic leaders. To move ahead, we all have to move together. And we have also understood that corporates will only sustain, this is also answer to your question, they will sustain in long run if they discharge their responsibility. If they sell you the wrong product, you will not buy it the second time. If they do wrong practices, you will not buy their product. So may I say, CSR is not corporate social responsibility only, it's corporate sustainable responsibility. The corporate world will also sustain only if they are socially responsible. And at the end of the day, it's not about corporates. Let's not burden them so much. It is individual social responsibility. It's you and me together. Let's not put everything on their shoulders. So let's think it's our responsibility to resolve all kind of small and big problems, may it be of conflict, may it be of growth, may it be of development. We all are a part of it. It's individual social responsibility. Thank you very much, dear audience, and my panelists. I'm sure we have had a very fruitful time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. I think it's been one of the most productive, effective, and interesting sessions. I really thank the chair and the panelists. And ladies and gentlemen, this is time for another very important thing, and that is lunch. With a request that by 2 o'clock you kindly be back, so that I don't have to come and make any announcement there. Just return it to us, so that for our future ongoing activities, we are in a position to contact you. And the third important thing is at the end of the valedictory session, there will be a peace song which all of us need to join, and the lyrics will be displayed here on the PPT. Thank you very much. Please enjoy your lunch.
Let us also give them a big clap. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Very I will certainly somewhere. I'll just. Thank you very much. It has been if you leave me, or you can mail it to me, and then